The Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CDEMA, in association with its partners and in collaboration with the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, the Bahamas presents the 10th Caribbean Conference on Comprehensive Disaster Management, CDM 10, December 4th to 9th, 2017, at Million Nassau Beach Hotel, the Bahamas. Watch the conference live daily from 8:30 a.m. on CDEMA's website, YouTube, and Facebook page. For more info, visit our website www.cdema.org/CDM10. CDM, the Road to Resilience Checkpoint 2017. Building resilience through partnerships.
Ladies and gentlemen, I ask please that you stand as we receive the Honorable Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. This time we will receive the national anthem of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas by the Royal Bahamas Defense Force Pop Band immediately after the presentation of colors by members of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force Rangers. We will continue this morning's ceremony with our invocation by Bishop Delton Fernanda, the President of the Bahamas National Christian Council.
Let us pray. Father, today, as we begin this wonderful time of sharing and preparing, we remember all of our Caribbean brothers and sisters and those that have been affected by this past hurricane season. We remember those that have received severe damage, those that are in the rebuilding process, those that are traumatized, those that are mindful that this is a every year occurrence, but we put our trust in you. And so as we gather today, I ask that these meetings be fruitful, that they bring a place of where we can learn from each other and be better prepared to do that which you're calling on these leaders to do. This is our prayer. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Bishop. You may be seated. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Darville, Youth Officer in the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture and the National Public Officer for the Bahamas Public Service, and I am indeed very privileged to be your chair for this morning's opening ceremony. Dr. the Honorable Hubert Minnis, Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the Honorable Douglas Slater, Assistant Secretary General of the CARICOM Secretariat, Captain Stephen Russell, Director of the National Emergency Management Agency of the Bahamas, Mr. Ronald Jackson, Executive Director of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, SEDEMA, Senator the Honorable Winston Garway of Grenada, the Honorable Samantha Marshall, Minister of Social Transformation and Human Resource Development, Antigua and Barbuda, the Honorable Michael Brown, Minister of Education, Antigua and Barbuda, the Honorable Mark Vanterpool, Minister of Communication and Works, British Virgin Islands, the Honorable Vanden Williams, Minister of Home Affairs, Transportation and Communications, the Turks and Caicos Islands, Mr. Dale Weber, Pro Vice Chancellor of Graduate Studies, University of the West Indies, Dr. Carlton Watson, Professor of the University of the Bahamas, and other members of the academic community, permanent secretaries, heads of departments, other senior public officers, heads of delegations, members of the local organizing committee, delegates, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant good morning. Welcome to the 10th conference of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency. At this time, we will continue with welcome and the introduction of the Prime Minister by Captain Stephen Russell, Director of NEMA, Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Please receive him.
Master of Ceremonies, Mr. Darville, thank you so much for the introduction. I stand on the protocol as presented. But I want to say a special thank you to our Prime Minister for joining us here this morning. I know that he has a very busy schedule this morning, so we're truly pleased that he can join us here this morning. But I stand on the protocol as presented. But it certainly gives me great pleasure to welcome the 18 participating states of the Caribbean Emergency Management Agency to this 10th Caribbean Conference on Comprehensive Disaster Management, the region's premier event on disaster risk management. We meet here in Nassau at a time when the region is recovering from major catastrophic storms, namely Hurricane Irma and Maria, which caused unprecedented destructions to the Commonwealth of Dominica, Ragged Island here in the Bahamas, and also the Turks and Caicos Islands, Antigua and Barbuda, the British Virgin Islands, and elsewhere in the region. We also meet on the heels of the recent UN CARICOM high-level donor conference, which was held in New York on November 20th and 21st of this year at the UN's headquarters. The aim there was to mobilize international support for its members devastated by Hurricane Irma and Maria. Areas of financial and technical assistance support were identified and requested by affected member states. This conference embraces the CDM concept as it stands as the keystone for the region's thrust to building disaster-resilient communities. Over the years, the CDM conference has showcased best practices emerging from SEDIMA's 18 participating states and provided professional development for disaster risk management practitioners, planners, environmental scientists, among others. This year, the theme is CDM, the Road to Resilience, Checkpoint 2017, Rebuilding Resistance Partnership, that is building resilience through partnerships, which means we must be cognizant of the fact that as a region of small island development states, we need the support of each other, especially during vulnerable times. As we look to the future of our region and respective countries, we must continue to encourage our young people in becoming disaster aware. I know that this session will focus on the role of adolescents in disaster management and resilient communities, strengthening livelihoods and partnerships. It is my hope that deliberations during the CDM 10 conference reflect that we have in common as Caribbean people, and the solutions to the problems derived therefrom seek to strengthen our resolve even further. Again, I want to also invite you to make sure you sign up for the 5K Disaster Risk Fund Run Walk on Saturday, which has been organized by the Rotary Bahamas, the Bahamas Press Club, SEDIMA and NEMA, and the local and international sponsors. Proceeds from this event will go towards assisting a family in need who suffered during the passage of Hurricane Irma. I also encourage you delegates to enjoy the hospitality that the Bahamas has to offer, be it our friendly people, beautiful waters, sunshine, or our local cuisine. Ladies and gentlemen, it also gives me great pleasure this time to introduce our Prime Minister. Hubert Alexander Minnis was born in April of 1954. He's a Bahamian physician and politician who has served as Prime Minister of the Bahamas since May of 2017. Mr. Minnis is the leader of the Free National Movement, the present governing party, and the Member of Parliament for the New Providence constituency of Kalani. He was first elected to the House of Assembly in 2007 and was appointed to the Cabinet as the Minister of Health. He succeeded Hubert Ingram as party leader, following the party's defeat in the 2012 elections. He was dismissed from the leadership role of the Free National Movement in December of 2016 and regained the position in April of 2017 after much internal conflict within the party. He became Prime Minister following the victory of his party in the May 10, 2017 general elections. Mr. Minnis was born in Bainstown, New Providence, to Rosalind North and Randolph Minnis. He was educated at a ladies' primary school, Western Junior, and St. Augustine's College, Nassau, and he also attended the University of Minnesota. After obtaining his Doctor of Medicine degree from the University of the West Indies and MRCOG from London in 1985, he returned home and began working as a physician at the Princess Margaret Hospital, where he served as a consultant and head of the Department of Obstetrician and Gynecology, and also as Deputy Chief of Staff. Mr. Minnis was President of the Medical Association of the Bahamas, member of the Medical Council, Chairman of the Hotel Corporation of the Bahamas, and an associate lecturer at the University of the West Indies in obstetrician and gynecology. He has a special interest and dedication to the promotion of Bahamian ownership in the economy and for the redevelopment of traditional over-the-hill communities. Mr. Minnis is married to the former Patricia Beneby and is the father of 3 sons. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand as I welcome the Dr. the Honorable Hubert Minnis, Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you very much. You may be seated. I'm so happy to see so many of my colleagues and classmates here at UWI when I was there as a student. Conference participants, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to address the 10th Caribbean Conference on Comprehensive Disaster Management under the theme, The Road to Resilience Checkpoint 2017, Building Resilience Through Partnership. The government of Bahamas is pleased that through the NEMA, we have been able to partner with the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency to host this important forum on comprehensive disaster management. I extend the warmest welcome to delegates who have traveled to the Bahamas to participate in this conference. We are happy to have at this conference disaster management practitioners from Latin America and other Caribbean states, the Pacific and international partners who will share their experiences on disaster risk reduction efforts. I'm also pleased to see that on Thursday, there will be a session on community resilience and youth. Please permit me to express our gratitude to SEDIMA for its support in conducting rapid needs assessment teams to those areas in the Bahamas recently affected by Hurricane Irma. We are also grateful to our international partners such as PAHO and WHO, USAID, OFDA, and other partners who readily assisted when called upon. I also wish to express my appreciation to various ministries of the government, the staff of NEMA, and the SEDIMA coordinating unit, and to the private sector, the media, and all the other agencies who are working to ensure the success of this conference. Ladies and gentlemen, this conference is being held in the aftermath of several devastating storms which plowed through our region this year, leaving massive destruction in their wake. Hurricanes Irma and Maria are hurricanes we will long remember. Sadly, the economic, environmental, social, and psychological damage will remain for quite some time with us. Hurricane Irma affected Antigua and Barbuda, Anguilla, St. Martin, St. Barts, St. Kitts and Nevis, Turks and Caicos, the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Barbados, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic. Hurricane Maria unleashed its destructive fury on Dominica, Guadeloupe, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Turks and Caicos, Cuba, and on Ragged Island here in the Bahamas, which was devastated by the monster storm and was subsequently left uninhabited. The final death toll for Puerto Rico is still unknown. Most of the residents of Puerto Rico remain without electricity today. There was unprecedented destruction in the Commonwealth of Dominica, with about 30 people killed and many thousands left homeless. In an address to Parliament in the wake of Hurricane Maria, I noted in his address to the UN, Prime Minister Skerrit spoke of the devastation on Dominica, a CARICOM partner with a population of approximately 75,000 people. And he said, and I quote, "The stars have fallen. Eden is broken. Our homes are flattened. Our buildings roofless. Our water pipes smashed, and road infrastructure destroyed. Our hospitals is without power, and schools have disappeared beneath the rubble. Our crops are uprooted. Where there was green, there is now only dust and dirt. The desolation is beyond imagination. I also noted, end quote, I also noted reports suggested that 80% of the buildings have either been destroyed or severely damaged. The beautiful rainforest of Dominica, which gave life to the island and its tourism industry, has been flattened. Hurricane Maria reminded us of the potential for the utter destruction of entire countries in our region. Correspondingly, the monster storm also reminded us that we must act collectively as a region in response to such storms. The Bahamas was happy to offer assistance to Dominica through the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, which dispatched the HMBS Lawrence Major, a roll-on, roll-off ship, which took goods and supplies from local and regional donors to Dominica. The Bahamas government also temporarily relaxed its immigration rules for a number of school children from Dominica who wished to continue their education here in the Bahamas. Several other countries in the region provided assistance, including taking in a number of citizens from Dominica. In the midst of such storms, the urgency of addressing the mitigation of climate change is paramount. Professor Carey Emanuel of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology notes, and I quote, "Global warming is tangibly increasing hurricane risk around the world," end quote. Various climate models suggest that damage from natural disasters have increased sharply. Such damage is likely to worsen, especially from flooding. And this will have devastating effect on our Bahama Islands. The National Wildlife Federation in the United States notes, "The latest science connecting hurricanes and global warming suggests more is yet to come." Tropical storms are likely to bring higher wind speeds, more precipitation, and bigger storm surge in the coming decades. As small island developing states are at great risk of climate change, we must develop new mindsets and protocols in this era of superstorms. By example, because of the projected path of Hurricane Irma and the potential destruction, the Bahamas government instituted an emergency evacuation to New Providence for the residents of several islands and communities. That's probably another hurricane traveling, so that's a warning. This was the latest such evacuation exercise of and in the history of the Bahamas. As a region, we must continue to press through CARICOM, the Alliance of Small Island States, the United Nations, and in other international forums for the promised assistance from developing countries to help countries in our region to mitigate against the effects of climate change overwhelmingly caused by developed countries. Ladies and gentlemen, we are constantly reminded that the countries in our region are located in one of the most hurricane-prone areas in the world. The risk we face threatened our fragile economies and demand that we have in place sound disaster risk management systems. We must continue to build disaster resilient communities through Partnership for Resilience. Here in the Bahamas, our NEMA team has met with SEDEMA coordinating units to discuss the country work program and its alignment with national goals identified in the regional CDM strategy. Our priorities are mapping out vulnerable areas and community preparedness. We are building capacity in our family islands and working to bring communities to a point where they can respond as quickly as possible in the immediate aftermath of a disaster, including logistical capacity. I have perused the program, and I am confident that at the end of these 4 days, you will leave here with a better understanding of what we all need to do in our respective jurisdiction, ways to move further along the CDM road to resilience. I wish to thank all the development partners and regional and international agencies who provided support for this conference. Delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a successful conference and encourage you to take time out to enjoy the hospitality of the Bahamas beyond the conference site, and do return to the Bahamas to enjoy more of the islands and communities of our archipelago. I thank you very much. May God continue to bless each and every one of us, and may God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister, for those keynote remarks. At this time, we will continue with remarks from Mr. Ronald Jackson, Executive Director of SEDEMA.
Thank you very much, Mr. Master of Ceremonies. Dr. the Honorable Hubert A. Minnis, Prime Minister, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and let me say also SEDEMA CDM champion. The Honorable Douglas Slater, Assistant Secretary General of CARICOM. The Honorable Samantha Marshall, Minister of Social Transformation and Human Resource Development, as well as Chair of the Council of Ministers of SEDEMA. The Honorable Winston Garraway, Senator and Minister of State in the Prime Minister's Office with responsibility for disaster management and information in Grenada. The Honorable Michael Brown, Minister of Education, Antigua and Barbuda. The Honorable Mark Vanterpool, Minister of Communications and Works, British Virgin Islands. The Honorable Vaden Williams, Minister of Home Affairs, Transportation and Communications in the Turks and Caicos Islands. Professor Dale Weber, Pro Vice Chancellor, Graduate Studies, University of the West Indies. Captain Steve Russell, Director, NEMA Bahamas. Distinguished National Disaster Coordinators, especially those from our member states who were significantly impacted who have managed to make time out to be here today. And with that, I want to recognize the presence of the head of the BVI Disaster Management Office and her deputy. I know that they have certainly given up time in supporting their country's recovery and reconstruction to be here, to be a part of this very important conversation. And I expect Dominica to join us soon. Our friends and partners from the UN community who I see well represented within the second row, welcome. Other development partners, esteemed colleagues, members of our private sector family who work with us over the period, members of U.S. Southern Command, who I am aware is here with us, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, lest I forget anyone, let me say friends and SEDIMA family, welcome. It is my distinct pleasure and privilege to welcome you to the 10th Caribbean Conference on Comprehensive Disaster Management. This year represents a key milestone for our CDM agenda and sends a clear signal that the CDM community remains committed to the agenda despite the numerous challenges we have faced along the way. I take this opportunity to thank you for your presence here this year, as it is a testimony to the tenacity and spirit present in the Caribbean community and in our partners to remain steadfast in the pursuit of the comprehensive disaster management results delivery. It also clearly demonstrates your willingness to share your experiences, good practices, current research in the hopes that it will advance the agenda for resilience. SEDIMA is once again honored to be co-hosting the conference with the National Emergency Management Agency of the government and the government of the Commonwealth of Bahamas. I wish to publicly recognize and thank NEMA for being a committed owner and stakeholder of SEDIMA itself and the CDM agenda, and for placing their national resources behind their express pledge of support. We are extremely grateful to the government of the Bahamas for continuing the support in ensuring that CDM 10 took place in light of the impacts experienced by the recent hurricane events on one of your family islands, Mr. Prime Minister, and your need to focus on its recovery. It would also be remiss of me if I did not acknowledge your warm hospitality and distinctly Bahamian welcome. Life is indeed grand here in the Bahamas. And I encourage our participants to make some time, preferably outside of the sessions today, to explore a bit on how grand life is here in the Bahamas. I am an honorary Bahamian, I'm told whenever I deplane, so I know that life is grand here in the Bahamas. We also anticipate that the Bahamian community will be able to take full advantage of the event being held here, as I do believe there is much they have to share with us and to gain from the community of practice available at this event, particularly given the experiences in the family islands over the last 3 years. Joaquim, Matthew, and we all remember what took place in September. At the 9th CDM conference convened in 2015, I vividly recall my reflections on the impacts of Hurricane Joaquin in Bahamas and Tropical Storm Erica on Dominica. I feel a sense of deja vu as I address you today, and I am reminded of the extent of the vulnerabilities and the exposure present in our member states. This, however, should not cause us to have a sense of doom and gloom, but rather it is an opportunity for us to embrace our successes. And even in the midst of the challenges, ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you that we have been a very successful region in advancing our agenda. And you will hear a lot about it starting today. But it is an opportunity for us to look beyond our current challenges as well, so that we may focus our collective efforts on resilience building in this region. The events also remind us that the potential threats is ever present to our other Caribbean member states. And as such, accelerating the agenda is not simply an action that is required in the reconstruction of the islands that have been affected, but indeed, it is a need in all SEDIMA member states and also those from our colleagues that are not members of SEDIMA, but which we are reminded by the words of our keynote speaker in 2015, the Honorable P.J. Patterson, who invited us as a region to pull closer together with our other Caribbean colleagues. And so we have representatives from the Dominican Republic who are here, and we welcome them, and to others who are further afield. But it reminds us that we have to redouble our efforts and continue with our actions towards creating the enabling environment for an effective risk reduction agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, today I feel as though we have come full circle. The region, through SEDIMA and the CDM strategic framework, has promoted the concept of resilience and resilient development from as far back as 2001, and I may even say from as far back as in the 1980s, through the PCDPP, that's the Pan-Caribbean Project for Preparedness Prevention. From as far back as then. We have for some time been advancing the agenda of integrated risk management. The resilience agenda was also at the center of the donor pledging conference convened 2 weeks ago in New York. In my mind, this has only served to validate the regional agenda crafted some 16 years ago and dispels any remaining doubt about the relevance of comprehensive disaster management strategic framework being advanced by SEDIMA in support of the broader global agenda. The challenge we now face is for us as a Caribbean community to define what resilience truly means in our context and to redefine our development paradigm to reflect this definition. We may very well find that within the context of our future desired state defined for the comprehensive disaster management at the end of 2024, that we would have potentially defined what resilience means to us. But I encourage us to really define it and to measure our journey on that pathway as we intend to do with the CDM strategic framework. My greatest hope is that the lessons learned and the opportunities presented by the unfortunate series of events this past September are not lost, but taken into account in our future planning, and that the confluence of support for the advancement of a resilient agenda is backed by real action at the household level, at the community level, at the national level, regionally, and internationally. Friends, this year's theme, The Road to Resilience, Checkpoint 2017, Building Resilience Through Partnerships, is appropriate as the journey ahead is one that can only be navigated through our joint efforts and the investments harmonized under the Comprehensive Disaster Management banner. We crafted the CDM agenda together, and as such, we are bound by a common cause and a shared vision. This year, the Regional System for Disaster Risk Management reached 26 years of existence, and the CDM philosophy formally attained more than 16 years in practice. Therefore, this 10th staging of the CDM conference represents an opportunity for reflection, review, recommitment to the ideas born in 1991. This is even more relevant given the effect of climate change on climate-sensitive hazards and the present state of social and physical vulnerability and fragility of the region's economies. At the 2015 conference, we commenced a process of reporting on the state of implementation of the 2014 to 2024 CDM strategy, and further gave commitment that this will be a standard feature of the biennial event. This approach has been taken as we seek to foster not just accountability to the Caribbean community and its stakeholders, but also to ensure that we inform our decisions on where future contributions or investments are required. We will be making our second report this year, going from our baseline year of 2014 to examine where we are after 2016. This year also saw even stronger partnership being expressed with the UNISDR in a number of areas, such as in advancing the worldwide initiative of school safety through the Caribbean Safe Schools program and the establishment of the, or should I say, the furtherance of the SEDIMA Model Safe Schools program. There has also been support in the advancement of the Caribbean chapter for the ARISE, which is a private sector chapter representing private sector partnerships, and also in the enhancement of the SEDIMA Comprehensive Disaster Management Audit Tool. The latter will potentially be an important vehicle for harmonized reporting on the Sendai framework, thereby reducing the reporting burden on SEDIMA states in their efforts to be accountable to the numerous disaster risk management related reporting requirements nationally, regionally, and globally. Ladies and gentlemen, this year's program and schedule of activities promises to be filled with rich content and with something for everyone. The youth session should not be missed, nor should the suite of professional development sessions lined up for Wednesday. We will also be awarding the CDM suite of awards launched in 2015, if you recall, here in the Bahamas at the gala dinner on Friday. And of course, there is our charity fun run and walk, a partnership between SEDIMA, NEMA, and Rotary Bahamas. I myself am feeling quite excited by the entire agenda of events just by mentioning them, and I am truly looking forward to sharing the days with you, our delegates, and faithful CDM stakeholders. In closing, I wish to thank our sponsors, as without you, we would not have been able to convene this very important platform. My heartfelt thanks and congratulations as well to the SEDIMA Coordinating Unit team and the NEMA Bahamas team for the hours of hard work put in to bring this event to fruition. They will continue to work hard over the remainder of this week, so I encourage them to press on. And you know that you're executive director, because I'm executive director not only for the SEDIMA Coordinating Unit, but I work for 18 member governments. So I will be right there behind the NEMA team, supporting them in this particular journey, and the SEDIMA team, in ensuring that you continue to enjoy the week of events. Thanks also to all of you, our delegates, who took the time out of your busy schedules to participate this week. Without you, this event cannot be a success. And so I'm really encouraging you to really participate. It's not just about the numbers. It's how well we engage in the conversation and the dialogue. It is a pleasure to have you here, and I wish you all a productive and successful CDM conference in 2017. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Director. I could not forgo the opportunity to say how yesterday morning, as I began to prepare for this morning's ceremony, I had a nightmare that the hotel's alarm would go off, and we would, yes, certainly. At this time, our Prime Minister must leave at this time. Let us stand, please, as he departs. Thank you. You may be seated. Yes, as I was saying, I had this dream yesterday morning that the hotel's alarm would go off, and we all would be swept to the outside in this mass drill. And so as I sat and the alarms went off, you know, I chuckled inside. You couldn't see it on my face because it was inside. I chuckled as, you know, the alarm went off. And then when it went off a second time, I said, oh, Lord, don't tell me this is a real drill. But I am to advise that it was simply a test, so you can breathe a sigh of relief. At this time, we would like to welcome the Honorable Ms. Samantha Marshall, Member of Parliament and Chairman of the SEDIMA Council. Please welcome Minister Marshall.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Master of Ceremonies. Let me ask to adopt the protocols that have been so ably established previously. I thought it would be wise for me just to simply say very few words, because otherwise we could be here for a while this morning. But I just wanted to reiterate that if anyone ever questioned what is the role of SEDIMA, I think we will have the answers within this forum if we don't already have those answers. We would have seen what has happened within the region recently, and it's not only affecting the Caribbean region, it has extended also to the United States of America. It is important that we as small countries within our region ensure that we do what is necessary to support each other and to ensure that we're not just reactive, but that we are indeed proactive. And I think that is what we must take away from this conference with SEDIMA when we look at what are the proactive measures that we can take to reduce the effect of disasters. Climate change is so serious to us now that within our country in Antigua and Barbuda, we have taken the steps of actually introducing that, looking at the Ministry of Education developing a curricula around the effects of climate change and how do you deal with that. I'm very happy to know that the youths will be having a forum within this session because I think it is the youths who have to ensure that we are prepared for future development. As we hold this session, let us remember we are only 7 months away from the next hurricane season. Don't laugh, it's true. We are 7 months away. We have not even yet recovered. Our brothers and sisters within Anguilla, BVI, Dominica, and even in my own hometown in Barbuda, we have not yet recovered. And yet we are preparing, we must now prepare for the next season. So this is real, very real. And I ask on behalf of my government that all governments within the region support SEDIMA. We are very happy to know that we have partners, not only regionally, but internationally, who are there to give us that guidance and support. But I think that disasters evolved so much now that we are being significantly affected. Who would have ever thought that we would have had hurricanes described as category 5+++? We've reached that mark. It is here. And it is important that if we want to protect our homes, if we want to ensure that our economies thrive, our social programs thrive, that our people thrive, that we ensure that we are very proactive in how we deal with disaster. I want to commend SEDIMA, and I must say thank you to the Honorable Prime Minister and his government of Bahamas, as well as to all those who would have assisted in ensuring that this event is a success. I hope that at the next conference we will focus also, I must say so, as the only woman sitting up here, and also the woman responsible for gender in my hometown. But I would hope that we will have a conference on how women also play a significant role in disaster risk management. So let us all participate. I want you also to enjoy Bahamas. This is my 3rd visit. I will sneak away, but I do want to be effectively participating as much as possible. I need to learn a lot too. But let us have a blessed conference, and I wish all well. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Marshall, and I'm sure the technocrats responsible for crafting the agenda would have taken note of your suggestion for the agenda for the next conference, on which we hope will look at women, the role of women in disaster risk management. Excellent. Do we have any excited young people here ready for the youth session? Oh, come on, man. Let's show them that the young people are here. Come on, let's hear you. I can't hear you. All right. Excellent. We have an outstanding cadre of young people who are going to be engaged over the next 5 days. They will continue with their outreach. Well, they will begin with their outreach this morning at a series of school visits to spread the word about disaster risk reduction and management. So we're excited to have our young people engaged from across the islands of the Bahamas and from across our member states of SEDEMA. At this time, we will welcome with a dance presentation, a cultural presentation from the National Dance School of the Bahamas, Mr. Jamai Grant. Please welcome him. Thank you, Mr. Grant. At this time, we conclude the opening ceremonies and we will continue into our first plenary for the morning. I'd like to say a very special thank you to our platform guests. Please, let's give them all another round of applause. I'd like to welcome Mr. Jeremy Collymore, who will moderate this morning's plenary. In addition, I'd like to welcome for presentation on this morning's panel, Pro Vice Chancellor Dale Weber of the University of the West Indies, Dr. Douglas Slater, Assistant Secretary General of the Caribbean Community Secretariat. Please welcome them at this time. Feel free. All right. You have your microphones? Oh, there you go. You're going to get them first. Sure. Would you like to work from your seat? Because we can give you a, you want to stand? Yeah, sure.
Pleasant good morning to all. I am delighted to have the opportunity to moderate this first plenary session of the 10th CDM conference. I'm particularly to speak to the issue of commitment to the regional integration movement for disaster risk management and the CDM agenda. First of all, let me thank those of you who have taken time from the front line to join us here to share our experiences and also receive, I hope, some psychological first aid. As I saw the dancer there, it reminded me of some time ago, the kind of energy I had. Some time ago. But I want to start the conference, and particularly this session, by making a very bold assertion, and it is to say that this call to recommitment comes some 40 years post-colonial Caribbean of hurricane-impacted events that have progressively altered the way we think and practice disaster risk management in the Caribbean. I will give you just a few indicators of those events and the things that they have initiated. Starting again with Dominica in 1979 and Hurricane David. We saw a spontaneous effort at neighborhood coordination of response effort initiatives out of Barbados. The first one, I think, post-independence. Then in 1980, after Hurricane Allen, the strongest storm by wind speed ever yet imagined in this part of the world, we saw a new emergence of attempts at structured, coordinated efforts to institutionalize disaster management through what now has become the infamous Pan-Caribbean Disaster Preparedness and Prevention Project. Development partners sought to support and enable national and local leadership in their preparedness and response capacities systematically over multi-year time frames. It delivered and developed what I would call collective outcomes that transcended the humanitarian development divide, working across mandates, sectors, and institutional boundaries. Ladies and gentlemen, I would say that we have in that experience a demonstration historically of the agenda for humanity, and the grand bargain concepts of the World Humanitarian Conference. We have been shaping this agenda. We need to recognize it. Hurricane Gilbert in 1988 in Jamaica saw the first efforts to engage our military in a structured way, though ad hoc, to humanitarian activities. 1989 Hugo in the Leeward Islands provided the proof of concept of the idea of humanitarian action and civil military engagement in humanitarian spaces. But it went further. This idea of the collective neighborhood spirit informing our humanitarian action gave birth to one of the most expeditious decision-making points in the region, the establishment of SEDERA, now SEDIMA. Looking back upon it, we could say that the governments of the Caribbean took some responsibility for shaping and leading the humanitarian action in their impacted spaces, even with little resources. Then in 1995, we had the triumvirate of Iris, Louis, and Marlin that gave the young SEDERA its first test of multi-island, multi-hazard, multi-island consequential impacts. Hurricane Ivan in 2004 provided us with the first test of efforts to integrate the international humanitarian system into the regional spaces. So we've had a wide sense of experience in the last 40 years. Now we are at checkpoint. my questions are, what were the issues and lessons identified? How fearful have we been to learn from these experiences? And therefore I say to you, as we go through this conference and start to recommit, we have to ask ourselves, notwithstanding the uniqueness of Irma and Maria as characterized, have they altered the fundamentals of the commitment needed to build resilient Caribbean societies and economies, or the importance we need to pay to what we already know? I throw that out as a big framing conversation for this conference. What I would say is that the 40 years of experience and institutionalized disaster risk management in the Caribbean really is an early script of the declarations of the World Humanitarian Summit to commit as local as possible and to as international as necessary. The message here, my friends, is that recommitment is birthed on introspection and reflection. And so, we want to thank the organizers of this conference for giving this opportunity to reflect, to explore how these events, institutional and programmatic frameworks serve the CDM cause in support of resilience. To do so, we have two distinguished leaders of our Caribbean institutions who will lead the conversation. First will be Professor Dale Weber, who is currently the Pro-Vice Chancellor, Graduate Studies at University of the West Indies. And he has a very important portfolio that is relevant to what we're doing. He presides over the Board of Graduate Studies and Research and has responsibility for the management of all academic and administrative aspects of postgraduate studies and research, which include the Disaster Risk Reduction Center and the Seismic Research Unit. He himself brings to this conversation some sense of the relationship between man and the environment, as he is a coastal geologist and an environmentalist at heart. I wish to invite Professor Dale Weber to give his statements on recommitment of the University of the West Indies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Collymore. Honorable Minister Samantha Marshall, Mr. Ronald Jackson, and you notice Ronald was applauding when we asked for young and energetic. I told him 1 out of 2. He can decide which. My co-presenter, my friend, Honorable Douglas Slater. With all the protocol being established, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, friends, good morning to you all. Let me start by offering apologies for our Vice Chancellor, Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, who is on duty outside of the region, but he didn't have to ask me twice, because this is an assignment that I would readily accept, and I hope I can deputize appropriately. Because in my capacity as Pro-Vice Chancellor for Graduate Studies and Research, that part gets left off all the while. It's such a long title. But it actually is the more important part because we use the graduate studies to get the research done. Truth be told, graduate students are the unlocked potential of research that we do not capitalize on. But I'll come back to that. I have the wonderful task of overseeing, yes, the Seismic Research Center, which is in Trinidad, the Center for Marine Sciences, which is in Jamaica, CERMES, which is in Barbados, and the Institute for Sustainable Development, the Center for Environmental Management, and the Disaster Risk Reduction Center, which are all based in the Vice Chancellery. That means I have the single largest headache when something like a hurricane or an earthquake or a volcano comes around. The importance of resilience in reducing the impact of hazards on societies and facilitating faster recovery has been recognized globally and regionally. The Sendai Framework for Disaster Reduction, which has been accepted by the UN General Assembly, states as one of its priorities investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience. In fact, the ultimate outcome of the Comprehensive Disaster Management Strategy and Framework 2014 to 2024, which is accepted by CARICOM states, is safer and more resilient Caribbean states. We in small island developing states, especially the Eastern Caribbean, share certain fundamental characteristics which increase vulnerability and natural hazards. Small sizes, limited natural resource base, open economies, still developing infrastructure, and limited access to international financial resources increase and exacerbate vulnerabilities to natural hazards and extreme events, and those eventually become disasters. Furthermore, the geological setting of the region creates its own problems. The rugged, steep topography, prone to landslides and sediment flow, initiated by hydrometeorological events, are a problem. These exist against a backdrop of less frequent and sometimes forgotten, but potentially high impact hazards such as earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and tsunamis. Disasters following hazards account for an average of about 20% of the variation in real GDP in growth in the Eastern Caribbean. They have been identified by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank as a key factor contributing to instability in foreign reserve earnings in the region. And current development trends in the Eastern Caribbean suggest that an exposure to natural hazards is likely to cause an increase in the future, resulting in a continued negative impact on development and a lack of resilience. According to the IMF, the Bahamas has on average faced larger damage and more frequent natural disasters over the last 20 years than the rest of the Caribbean, with an annual damage averaging about 2% of GDP, compared with 1.25% for the rest of the Caribbean. That was then. With the recent events such as Hurricanes Irma and Maria, we have seen a period of about over 21 days, a rollback in regional development in some of our Caribbean countries and territories of about 2 to 3 years setback. Recently, there's been a suggestion that there's been as high as 120% GDP loss in some of our countries over the last few weeks. The University of the West Indies, which has campuses on all 17 territories that contribute to the university, either a campus or an online learning center, has suffered damage from hurricanes before. But in this season, with 3 of its locations currently inoperable and 1 in Dominica completely or almost completely destroyed by Hurricane Maria, the situation we are facing at the university is unprecedented. The UWI itself, and therefore the tertiary learning institutions within the Caribbean community, did not escape the impact, or does the message escape us, of the need to be deliberate in our attention on mainstreaming resilience into our way of working, thinking, and living. The invitation for the UWI to rethink its role and recommit as a higher education institution in transition towards a more resilient society is coming, therefore, at a time when there is mounting concern about the repeated and extensive losses to the Caribbean economies and societies, mainly from the impact of natural hazards. But the university has a long history of involvement in the area of hazard assessment and management, going back to the establishment of the Seismic Research Center in St. Augustine in 1957 and the earthquake units at Mona in 1985. Efforts to drive the integration of the disaster risk management thought process into the curriculum of the UWI were led by the pioneering work of the 1981 Pan American Disaster Preparedness and Prevention Project, which was just mentioned by Jeremy. That was itself the result of a partnership of the United Nations Disaster Relief Organization, the Caribbean Community, the Pan American Health Organization and World Health Organization, the Red Cross, as well as Canada, United Kingdom, and the European Union. Well, then it was European Economic Community. With colleagues driving, such as Franklin MacDonald, Barbara Carby, and the same Jeremy Collymore here who thinks he's young and can dance, we set the stage as to what would become the new fit for the University of the West Indies. Through lobbying and advocacy of our partners like the UNDP, PAHO, SEDIMA, the UWI, through the Unit for Disaster Studies started by Rafi Ahmad, in the Department of Geology at Mona in 1991 has moved from being a fledgling relationship with the disaster risk management concept to a fully grown, deep collaboration realized in the establishment of the Disaster Risk Reduction Center in 2006 under the then Vice Chancellor Nigel Harris. The most recent partnership between the UWI and Global Affairs Canada, the Enhancing Knowledge and Application of Comprehensive Disaster Management, ECODAM as we call it, this project was developed specifically to support the regional comprehensive disaster management. But to hear more of that, you must come tomorrow when I will say more on that topic. During this transformative and transitional period, the UWI embarked on several initiatives. A diverse set of initiatives which saw disaster management content being incorporated into a number of courses and programs. Public education, nursing, medicine, mass communication, public administration and education, engineering, environmental science, geology. Most programs that had any environmental tweak got a dose of disaster risk management. The result is a diverse set of research courses, tools, services that can assist in championing the cause of resilient development in the Caribbean. The disaster risk management stream of the Natural Resource Management MSc, which is taught on multiple campuses of the UWI, is a good example, where the DRM stream complements the Integrated Urban and Rural Environmental Management, which is taught at the Mona campus, water resources and climate change taught at the Cave Hill campus, and biodiversity taught at the St. Augustine campus. Again, partnerships are important since many students access these programs via our partnerships with CRIF, who provide scholarships for up to 10% of the students each year. Our Vice Chancellor, Professor Beckles, has recognized that UWI must be on the front line of the charge that resilience must underpin our new way of thinking and working. To support the UWI internal agenda for our resilient university, he has appointed a resilient advisor. This is informed by his recognition that the University of the West Indies represents CARICOM's largest single diversified reservoir of competencies and expertise that, if strategically harnessed, can contribute significantly to altering this trajectory of increasing loss of critical and scarce resources. The leadership of the UWI recognizes that it was not established just to look after itself, nor is it funded so to do, but to engage the challenges facing the host communities. In this regard, the primary mandate of the University of the West Indies is to serve the advancement of the Caribbean community and sustain development. In fact, our 2017-2022 new strategic plan, which we are just rolling out, the theme is revitalizing Caribbean development. So the call comes at the right time. This new strategic plan recognizes the symbolic relationship between the UWI and the Caribbean communities and the need for both to work closely together to strengthen the competitive position of regional economies. The issue of resilience sits comfortably with our AAA strategy: access, alignment, and agility. This is especially relevant when we come to alignment, where our strategic goal speaks of building relevant, value-added relationships with our alumni, with producers of wealth, and promoting the government and non-government sectors and international partners by ensuring that the UWI offerings, that is both the undergraduate and the graduate level, as well as our research, fulfill the needs of the society that it serves. We have established 18 research clusters which demonstrate the focus and interrelated approach being used. These clusters came about from a study of the websites of all contributing countries to the university, where we ranked and itemized what did the country think to be important. A few of them which will ring a bell with you are disaster risk management, climate change, agriculture and food security, renewable energy, sustainable tourism, single market and economy, gender justice, and I put that one specially in for you, madam, biodiversity and biotechnology, education, health and wellness, and it goes on. But we have harnessed what we think to be the 18 most important things to drive the research of the university over the next 5 years, starting with a 2-year operational plan. So in recommitting to the idea of building regional resilience within a wider sustainable framework, it is clear that this will require a change in how we, as a higher education institution, do business. It will require a change to a culture which now embraces the whole of the institution approach advocated in our strategic plan, and embedding of resilience considerations within our governance, our research, our teaching, our management, our operations, and our outreach. Our campus spaces must become laboratories for energy conservation, for alternative energy use, for lowering the carbon footprint, for valuing of green spaces. In fact, the new medical faculty, the teaching and research building at the Mona campus, is an example where the university wants to go. This building is now thought to be the greenest building in Jamaica with all its additions. We must encourage and foster the community of learning and research to co-production of knowledge, inspiring a critical mass of citizen scientists. We believe that our student population must also be engaged in a way of working, living, and thinking. As a champion for a culture of resilience in the region, we will be required to further reorientate our curriculum so that it aligns with the resilience agenda. This is more than an inclusion of the relevant subject material and the pursuit of inter- and transdisciplinary approaches, but more about the development of education for sustainable development competencies of university, college, educators, learners, and those who are yet to apply. Competencies required for the change in toolkits, mindsets. These include systemic thinking, critical reflective thinking, futures engagement, and values clarification. With this change in mindset, and given our role as a sector lead within the CDM Harmonization Council, we have to re-examine how we work in the education sector subcommittee. In particular, we need to revisit the pedagogy of CDM education program we promote, the modes of delivery, and how we reach people across the Caribbean. We need to create a digital database of heritage knowledge and other important information with off-island storage that is available for use by technocrats, by scientific researchers. Risk management requires us to ensure that the data are available to develop and improve existing models of natural systems and their potential impacts on the society. We need to infuse a fundamental shift in our cultural perspective from a focus on hurricanes, even though we have them more often, to ensure that we have all hazards being considered. We need to actively promote the development, where necessary, of legislation and enforcement of building codes, regulations, etc. We need to develop the capacity to monitor and model natural hazard processes and their impact on society, and create tools that enable better integration of natural hazard impacts into development planning. We need to create the environment that enables hazard-resilient development planning, which makes full use of the latest advances in science and technology, including understanding of hazards, to guide our policies and actions. We need to improve our communication. Communication is of critical importance, and so scientific institutions and crafters of new knowledge and research must effectively communicate their work to the relevant stakeholders in the region. Assessing risks associated with natural hazards is a complex activity. Issues such as trust, risk, perception, and perception gaps, gender biases, scientific uncertainty, data insufficiencies are all unresolved and serve to complicate our assessments. Countries in our region rely on the technical capacity of regional and global agencies for knowledge services and information regarding natural hazard risk. However, generating knowledge and information a regional information base that is useful in decision making at a national level is challenging and requires simultaneous, sustained capacity building at both the national and regional levels. Capacities already exist. Others must be created. But the key is to have the Caribbean governments and people make full use of that which exists. As we move forward on this recommitment journey, we will carefully consider and embrace the people's sustainability principles for higher education. In this journey, we expect to continue to partner with as many comprehensive disaster management community personnel as we can, as we build resilience through the partnerships, because we are the University of the West Indies, a light rising from the West. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Weber. I need to let you know that you have a chance to ask him a few questions about this recommitment. It's a serious thing, recommitment, especially if you're in a marriage for some time. Now we're inviting the Honorable Douglas Slater, Assistant Secretary General, the Director of Human and Social Development of Caribbean Community, to speak to us. He's a national of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and a medical doctor by profession. A number of those around today. He was the Minister of Foreign Affairs. That's going to be an asset for us. And he has interfaced with the ACP EU and with the Eastern Caribbean Development Bank as a representative of the Prime Minister. He was a Minister of Health and the Environment, so he's very sensitive to the issues that are being raised here today. So he's also an executive member of and chair of the Executive Committee of PAHO. That means that he has a lot of influence with a key partner of the RRM and the CDM family. Please welcome the Honorable Dr. Douglas Slater to recommit CARICOM.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Co-presenter, my friend, Prof. Dale, Honorable Ministers of Government, other senior civil servants of the Government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, other partners, which include international development partners and other regional institutions. I see here representatives from the Pan American Health Organization. I can easily say I endorse all that has been said this morning because it's going to be very difficult for me to say anything new. That's the disadvantage of coming last. But I won't do that. I bring greetings on behalf of the Secretary General, Ambassador Erwin Lorak, who would have really loved to be here, but as you know, we have a lot of different duties, and he is currently doing some of that in another member state. I represent here the CARICOM, which is a Caribbean community of nations, but disaster, as we have heard, goes beyond CARICOM in the Caribbean. So I specifically welcome the representatives from the Dominican Republic and other Caribbean countries. I don't know if Cuba is represented here, but they are one of our brother countries. And I think earlier I heard that we may have representatives from the Pacific region. If that is so, a very, very special welcome, as we are part of the small island development states, and we share a similar history of the vulnerabilities that we have heard of all morning. I wish to start by saying, as a representative of the CARICOM Secretariat, I wish to convey to my good friend, Dr. Ronald Jackson, and his team at SEDEMA, sincerest gratitude to your organization on behalf of the Secretary General and of the member states of CARICOM for the tasks that you have been delivering over the years through the various disasters. And as Dale implied, I don't want us to limit these disasters, as bad as they were, to hurricanes, because we are in an earthquake zone. We have volcanoes. I happen to come from a country where we have an active volcano, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The last eruption was 1979. So we have droughts, and we have floods. The Honorable Minister said that we were 7 months away from the next hurricane season. But in 2013, December 24th, we had a very disastrous event, flooding event. I witnessed it in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and St. Lucia. So, disaster is much more than hurricanes. And when we talk about droughts, we have had some droughts, unusual droughts. And as I think about that, I want to use the opportunity to thank all of the institutions of CARICOM, and we have many of them, who perform in one way or the other, coordinated by SEDEMA, to address many of these disasters. For example, CARFA, the Caribbean Public Health Agency, is always ever present and necessary to address health issues, public health issues. Because as we know, with disasters come those challenges. We have heard of the disruption of water supplies and therefore risk of infectious diseases, etc. CIMH, Caribbean Institute of Meteorology and Hydrology, very important institute that has the technology and the resources to help to do some modeling, to help our nations to be prepared. Because in all of this, management of disaster preparation is so very important. So I want to thank all of our, that's not all of our institutions, of course, but we really want to thank you. The UWI, in fact, I just recently attended the COP23 in Bonn. And as we have heard, we are very vulnerable to issues of climate change. And I think it was one of the UWI professors presented a scenario. Most of us will know that the Caribbean had proposed at the Paris summit that we must aim at limiting global increases to 1.5 degrees centigrade. In fact, we had a slogan that said 1.5 to stay alive. The global community, though that was mentioned in the outcome document, was working more or less at 2 degrees. But most of us know that if we continue as we are going, it is more likely that we'll be having increases over 3 degrees. And it was very reassuring to see that our own indigenous scientists from the UWI were able to model and demonstrate to our leaders what are the scenarios that we can be confronted with, 1.5, 2, and up to 3. And I can tell you, it is of serious concern. If we do not have temperature levels limited to 1.5, it will be a challenge for us to stay alive. So, at least I do not have it on record. The CARICOM Secretariat and the CARICOM community is here to say that we are fully recommitted to support our institutions, and especially SEDEMA, as we continue to address the issues of comprehensive disaster risk management. We must. What is the environment in which we operate? Well, some of them were raised by Dale. We are small island developing states with the vulnerabilities, natural vulnerabilities previously mentioned. But in addition to that, we are to some extent paying for our own success, because we have over the years improved our development and economies, and the powers that be have graduated us to middle income and upper income countries. So what are the implications of that? Serious. They are that we do not currently have access to concessionary financing for our development. Now, we are among the most highly debted countries in the world. Some of our countries have up to triple figures, or just certainly over 60% debt to GDP ratios. There's little fiscal space. Our member states do not have the resources, the capital resources, to address issues like disaster and still address the many social developmental issues. Then, if we have been following the news, some of the international partners, some of the more important ones, are thinking more inwardly, and that means that access to even international aid is becoming a challenge. In fact, I just recently read that the United States has indicated that they will be coming out of the World Migration Pact that was supposed to be adopted next year. It was signed in New York last year. Why is this important? Well, I just attended, and I heard that there are some members of the South Command here. We were just recently in the Dominican Republic discussing the issue of regional security. Now, when we are talking about disaster, we know that it impacts many, if not all, aspects of our development and lives. In a disaster, we have migration that wasn't planned for. We remember after 2010, that earthquake in Haiti. Many Haitians were welcomed into the United States. But if you have been following news, you would hear that just recently, the administration has announced that it will no longer be extending their welcome there. Now, these are important factors for us to take into consideration. When there are disasters, Prime Minister just stated that they changed some of their policies to welcome some of our neighbors. So it means we in the region have to do more for ourselves. And to do so, we need this partnership we are hearing here. And as I listened, before we came in here, I was telling let's hope that that still is a test. Good. So partnership is important, and at all levels. At the risk of disclosing my age, and I was wondering how close I am to Jeremy, because since I was a little boy, I told him I heard about him. No. But seriously, I remember as a boy in primary school, there was a hurricane that devastated Tobago. I think it was 1964, it might have been. 63? Good, thank you. And there are a few things that stick in your memory, and I could remember, we had one radio station, and I always remember hearing, "Build back Tobago, build back Tobago." And as children, we were requested by our parents to go and gather firewood to roast breadfruit in St. Vincent, and to gather ground provisions, etc. And I remember my father was a fisherman, and we had a lot of dry fish, and we packed them in boxes. Now, this might sound simple, but it goes to the idea of holistic partnership. So it starts right there. I'm very pleased to see the youngsters here and their commitment to participate in this, because it's going to be very important. The private sector is most important, because they are supposed to be the engine of growth, of the development of our community. We heard the mention of CRIF. That's the catastrophic risk insurance. We need a partnership. Regional and international partnership is very important. The commitment of all is necessary if we are to succeed. I believe that your presence here is a demonstration of that commitment, and I believe with the leadership of SEDEMA, which has demonstrated its ability, but we need more support and resources, especially for institutions like SEDEMA. CARICOM stands ready to support through the Secretariat and our institutions. And I hope that our listeners and our member states will understand, because quite often you hear people ask, what is CARICOM about? What does CARICOM do? Remember that CARICOM, as a community, we do a lot that quite often people are not aware is action of CARICOM. University of West Indies of one of our institutions, SEDEMA. If we can just say SEDEMA, and what SEDEMA does is part of the activity of CARICOM, I think that is enough to say that CARICOM is important. Regional integration is most important today, especially in addressing issues like this. I do wish the deliberation success, and I am optimistic that they will be successful. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Slater. I did promise you a chance to ask a few questions, and the organizers have graciously consented to give me a few minutes to facilitate that. Yes. There's a mic on the floor roaming. We can get one from here.
Good morning. Mr. Moderator, this goes to any of the two panelists there. A recommitment to CARICOM sounds very good. CARICOM is made up of states. There's no secret that the states are not supporting CARICOM financially and not supporting the organs of CARICOM financially. SEDEMA, which I'm a part of, is one prime example. Where do we go from here? The commitment sounds good, but where do we go from here? What is happening at CARICOM to cause the countries to own their children, as in CARICOM, the University of the West Indies, and SEDEMA? How can it happen? How can CARICOM work with the countries? How can the countries be made to participate and to support CARICOM and its organs?
Thank you very much. Dr. Slater, you were querying about not having much to say, having a lot being said before. So this is your time to have a say on that issue. I suspect there may be some ministers in here who can graciously take the mic and reinforce this message if they think it's appropriate. Recommit, yes.
Hello?
Turn it on. It's on? Okay, go ahead.
On? You hearing me? Okay, good. Thanks for that question. May I start by saying that we may need to understand what or who is CARICOM. All of us as citizens of the community form part of CARICOM. I think the point you raise is very relevant. We at the Secretariat, as you will understand, we are a civil service, a public service that serves the member states. And indeed, there has been a challenge, as some of it I alluded to, the fiscal challenges of member states, the high debt, and therefore they do have challenges in meeting their commitments to the organization, including the Secretariat. So it's not only the institutions, the Secretariat. I wish to say that member states are very much aware of that. At every conference of heads, it is reiterated. And there has been some attempts to address it. For example, we have just recently commissioned a consultancy to address the issue of automaticity of financing of the regional institutions. The report has just recently been submitted, but beyond that I can't give more details because the executive management has not yet had the time to look at it, and we hope to forward the report to the conference soon thereafter. But yes, I agree with you that basically I think you're saying we must put our money where our mouth lies. If we are going to say we are committed, we have to demonstrate that practically. And I do agree with you on that. But it is in an environment where there are many other challenges, and it's like stretching the dollar at the best you can. And let's hope that we do improve the issue of commitment financially to the institutions as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions from the floor? I see one down there. Looks like David Smith.
Thanks very much. It's a question about research. Both Prof. Weber had indicated that research is extremely important. If we are going to adapt to climate change, if we're going to adapt to all the disasters that might come along, we do actually need to find out more about them. We need to do more research. How do we persuade Caribbean governments, cash-strapped as they are, that putting some of their hard-earned taxes into research is a good idea?
Okay, that one sounds like mine. Let's take the 3 A's as I presented them: access, alignment, and agility. Access really has 2 parts. In the Caribbean, we have the lowest enrollment rate in tertiary education anywhere in the world. Fewer of our youngsters are getting to tertiary education. So we need to increase access. Why do I start there? Because we need to get more of our individuals into that tertiary education so that when they become the ministers, when they become the prime ministers, we already have covered that foundation in terms of where the knowledge base lies and the importance of various pieces that we put together. But the other part of access is providing the research such that countries, public and private sector, they will know that the research is available. So we need to have the research that's already available, accessible to the decision makers within the countries. Now, you ask how do we get more of their money committed? I'll be very honest, I'm not sure we'll get any more of their money committed. But what we need is an alignment between their needs. The University of West Indies and any other tertiary institution that does research should provide itself, as we're trying to do in our alignment portfolio, to be the research engine. So industry, public and private sector, rather than paying some university from wherever to come and do research or building your own R&D within your company at an exorbitant cost. For a fraction of that cost, I'm sure we can provide the research within the university to answer the questions. What we need to do is to know what your questions are so that we can align our research. Now, there's always going to be space for blue sky research. We must know why things started and when they have changed, but there's also focused, purposed research, which is paid for by those who want the answers, which comes to the last A, which is agility. We now need to start giving those answers. Now, I'm very cognizant, and I've been with the university for 30 years, our wheels turn slow. But in an effort to move that, agility is now one of the things we're putting forward. And we're assigning special research outfits, which you know about, David, because you're now in one, special research outfits purposed to do specific research in short time with short turnaround. And we have also a special management component, which is also looking at how do we get those projects, sign off on them, and get a return on them. I mean, Ronald and I were talking about turning around an MOU the other day, which it looks like it could take months. Now we need to turn it into hours. So agility is what we need to do on our part.
Thank you all very much for the questions. I've been advised that we need to bring this to a wrap, and I want to thank the Assistant Secretary General and the Pro Vice Chancellor for taking the time up. I believe that somewhere in this conference, those issues about financing of our systems will resurface again, and whether we are speaking about commitments or choices. and I think it's an important consideration. 1.5 stay alive, financing for the drive. But coming out of the conversation though, we are hearing some perspectives about shaping the new agenda for disaster risk management, birthed on what we have learned and what we know. We understand that commitment means recognition of something, and we've already identified that in the context of this as CDM and the alignment to resilience. The need to revisit our knowledge products, our prioritized investments in data, and the resourcing as opposed to financing of these investments seems to be a key issue. We have been challenged to look at this issue of gender in disaster risk management and in CDM, and I think is a timely call, which I'm sure there will be a response to at some point in time and in some format. The issue of displaced persons was touched on very slightly, but I think given the nature of the events that we've had and are foreseen to expect down the road, this will become a major issue in the new humanitarian landscape of the Caribbean, and certainly in the social protection policy architecture of our community. And we would expect that there will be a widespread conversation on this somewhere along the line. So again, I want to thank you all very much for making yourselves available, and I hope that all of you will reflect on your own contribution and space in the CDM and recommit to something, whatever that is. Thank you very much. We will reconvene at 10:50 a.m. right here. Yeah, and the break is just outside. The break is outside. And it's cold. Sorry, it's cold juice. And, I'm not sure what it is.
Disaster Emergency Management Agency, SEDEMA, in association with its partners and in collaboration with the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, the Bahamas presents the 10th Caribbean Conference on Comprehensive Disaster Management, CDM 10, December 4th to 9th, 2017, at Million Nassau Beach Hotel, the Bahamas. Watch the conference live daily from 8:30 a.m. on SEDEMA's website, YouTube and Facebook page. For more info, visit our website www.sedema.org CDM10. CDM, the Road to Resilience Checkpoint 2017. Building resilience through partnerships. The Caribbean Disaster Emergency